Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 683 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And of course, it is the Sunday fundraiser night, so let's raise some money to save some lives in Ukraine.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, as Ukraine has been able to raid some Russian trenches today in some pretty fantastic fashion. And we also got to see that today is the day of days. It is the day that every single part of the week is building up to. It is the Sunday fundraiser. And tonight's Sunday fundraiser is being run for Razom For Ukraine, an amazing nonprofit organization that has been operating in Ukraine since, hell, about the time of 2016 to 2015, and has been providing a massive amount of humanitarian aid and support to all of the Ukrainian citizens who desperately need it near the frontline areas. They do amazing work helping to save lives. And if you want to be a part of helping the Ukrainians to achieve victory and also save the lives of their own citizenry, make sure to support Razom For Ukraine tonight, because it is an incredible nonprofit, and it is one that we know has clear help and values as far as the Ukrainian war effort goes. But moving on outside,
And also, we've already raised 663, by the way. We're already a good ways there.
damn, but we
Damn,
have
son.
gotten a pretty good ways there, and hopefully we'll get to see that it gets even further a good ways there, maybe on up towards that 3K goal, and hopefully the Lee Spring Army can reach it, because I know one thing: the Lee Spring Army has never missed a goal, and I'm sure the Lee Spring Army is not going to miss one tonight. But moving on into the major news of the past 24 hours. We have heard that apparently the Russians are trying to conduct some very major restructuring of the Russian military. Before we get into that really breaking news of all of the trench raids that the Ukrainians have been conducting today that we were able to find on film, I want to make sure to tell you all about a major structural change that may affect how the war goes on inside of Russia. As many of y'all know, there is the Russian army, but there's also this other group called the Rosguardia. The Rosguardia is the equivalent of the National Guard here in the United States, or more so the territorials of the United Kingdom. They're something along the lines of a reserve force, and they're not really meant to be deployed into fighting areas. They're more so meant as like militias or defense forces if the nation was to be invaded. And from what the British Ministry of Defense has been gathering from intelligence spheres in Britain, it appears that the Russians are making some very drastic changes to what the Rosguardia is. And so let me tell y'all what the British Ministry of Defense has been hearing about, so that way we can all get a better idea of what the Russians may be looking at big picture-wise going on through the rest of the war. According to the British, Rosguardia, the Russian National Guard, is bolstering its resources and personnel as a result of upheavals in Russia's internal security scene from the war in Ukraine. What we're getting from this is that after the Prigozhin coup of mid-2023, the Russian central government is so concerned about a similar coup or an uprising happening that they're actually diverting war materials and resources from the front lines and the fighting units inside of Ukraine, and they're actually putting whatever they're able to produce towards the Rosguardia instead. So that way, if an insurrection was to happen again, there will be well-equipped and a numerous amount of Rosguardia units to try and stand up and quash the rebellion as soon as it was able to rise. This is also showing that the Russians may be afraid of a general uprising as a whole, and in response to that, they're trying to equip and prepare their Rosguardia units to prepare for, well, to deal with that if that is to arise. But as the British Ministry of Defense continues to elaborate, elements of private military company Wagner Group came under Rosguardia control from October 2023, followed on the 3rd of January this year by the Donetsk People's Republic's Vostok Battalion, which is a battalion that was raised at the very beginning of the separatist uprising in 2014, at the very beginning of the Ukraine war officially, and has existed as an official part of the DPR's army up until the 3rd of January, because it's now been absorbed into Rosguardia forces. Moscow has also been advancing its efforts to dissolve the DNR's Kaskad group, which specializes in drone operations and is subordinate, well, parts of it are subordinate to the Rosguardia as well. And at the moment, they're currently trying to dismantle that unit and also make it a part of the Rosguardia. In July of 2023, the Russian State Duma authorized Rosguardia to employ heavier weaponry. New capabilities, along with its augmentation with experienced veterans from other groups, will likely represent a significant increase in combat effectiveness. But all of this is specifically being focused inside of Russia, not into Ukraine. A few Rosguardia units do end up being reserve units inside of Ukraine, but the number of those compared to the proper Russian army is incredibly small. Most of these units are being improved and bolstered with their equipment, manpower, and even veteran soldiers, specifically for the reason that they are preparing for another uprising. This is giving us an idea that at least well behind the scenes, there's a great fear by the central Russian government that another uprising could happen at any moment, and they just don't know where it will be from, who it will be, or what they'll need to be able to respond to it and put it down. This time it also appears that they're not going to be trying to negotiate with whoever is conducting the uprising. It appears that this time they are planning on just having the raw manpower and forces alone to be able to crush it and destroy it. So we'll, of course, be keeping an eye on this and seeing where this goes, because it sounds as though the Russians are preparing for another kind of a coup to be coming around the corner. But
I'm surprised the Russians aren't just going to use their very light police forces like last time when Wagner, pillaged across the country and basically almost made its way to Moscow if it hadn't been for taking people hostage. It seems like maybe they rely on those people, but for them to have to be preparing for a whole nother coup, things can't be going too well for them if that's the case.
Yeah, I don't think it can, because, if it was just a one-off thing, they wouldn't be preparing like they are right now. This is starting to certainly show that they are preparing for some larger shockwaves to be coming around the corner inside of Russia, or hell, they may even be preparing to create like Einsatzgruppen and death squads to just roam around Russia and, do whatever they need to with emergency powers given to them. Who knows? It's getting very weird, though, especially with what the British are starting to show as their indicated activity of just preparing the Rosguardia for whatever's coming around the corner. And as many of you all know, corruption is always a very serious thing. It's a big deal, especially inside of former Soviet republics. A lot of them have dealt with it quite well. And countries like Ukraine are still dealing with those after effects of being under Soviet control for such a long time, but they're, of course, trying to combat the corruption. The Russians do not. They practically writhe in the corruption and live within it, never trying to fix it and just work with the system that they have, a wildly corrupt one. This causes a lot of inefficiency in the military sphere, including the Rosguardia and the proper Russian army that we see fighting inside of Ukraine right now. But oddly enough, this corruption isn't just a Russian thing. It actually appears that corruption of these kinds of levels is largely a communist thing. And really quickly, to do almost a complete 180 and bring y'all to almost another part of the world, kind of the same continent that Russia's, well, technically it is the same continent that Russia's on, at least half of the country, but it's a country that shares a little bit similar with Russians as far as the military goes and as far as corruption goes. The People's Republic of China. Some of y'all may have heard about this little tiny thing that the U.S. the U.S. intelligence sphere was able to possibly pull out of the People's Republic of China, and it tells us a very interesting story, at least if this is true. And we're going to assume at the moment, because U.S. intelligence agencies recently have not given us any reason to not believe their statements. There is a statement that the U.S. Intelligence agencies have made that says that the Chinese are also dealing with corruptions on similar levels that the Russians are. And this particularly deals with weapons procurement and arms production. The Russians also have a serious problem with that, and that's why we don't really see a lot of new modern Russian equipment making its way into Ukraine. But the Chinese appear to have even a worse problem. From what we're told, the missiles that China is producing, and China is currently having sit inside of their silos right now, are having issues. Apparently, the fuel that the normal rockets or missiles would use doesn't exist. It's actually just filled with water, according to intelligence reports.
Are you talking about China's new water towers and water system?
Yes, I am. I'm talking about those brand new kind of missile. And a lot of people have been...
I think they got those direct from Alibaba, by the way. And it didn't take too long to arrive. They didn't have to put it on a ship and send it over the seas or anything like that. They just simply took them out of the warehouse, the sweatshop, and put them up right there in the middle of the place and said, "There you go, new water tower." It just happens to look like a missile.
Man, I gotta tell you, it's kind of wild too, beyond the jokes, to hear about something like this, because to think that the U.S. is now saying that they don't have to worry about a Chinese response because most of their missile forces don't even have operable missiles, they're just filled with water, that is pretty wild of a thing to hear. And to hear that publicly the U.S. military is now going to be working off of that assumption being true. Now, a lot of people have been throwing up the statements whether that's even true or not. Some people are saying that that's just an attempt by the U.S. intelligence agencies to discredit growing Chinese military prowess. And so that way the US government could take more aggressive actions in East Asia, and the public would not be that concerned, because the public has been told that these rockets, these missiles that the Chinese have, are filled with water. They don't even have usable fuel inside of them. Some other people have been saying that the statements are in fact true, and there may be massive underlying amounts of corruption within the Chinese military that has led to this kind of a conundrum happening and now becoming public, which is a national embarrassment for the Chinese if true. So many people have been saying different things, and I want to ask y'all tonight, what do y'all think about the bottled water rockets? Do y'all think that these things are real? Do y'all not think they're real? What kind of impact do you think this is going to have on U.S. foreign policy in the East Asian area? Does anyone...
That sounds like a swell poll question that I'm putting up literally in 5 seconds.
Oh, and I think a lot of people are going to be invested in this one, because while it's not our normal Ukraine war news, it's such a shocking thing to hear that we have to talk about it for a little bit, because we're a pro-Ukraine channel, but we do cover news in the aspect of what is beneficial for the Western world. And of course, the Ukraine war and Ukraine winning is a very beneficial thing for the Western world if it turns out the way we are hoping it will turn out. But this is something that may pose a once-in-a-lifetime kind of an opportunity for the West to act the way it needs to in East Asia without being extremely concerned of an official or serious Chinese response. So I gotta ask y'all, what do y'all believe? Do y'all think these bottled water rockets are real deal? Do you think the missiles are fully operable and they're not bottled water rockets? What do y'all think? Because there are a lot of y'all that have many different opinions. Matthew and me are actually going to hold back on our opinions until we get answers on this poll. But I'm going to tell y'all really quickly a little bit more context about what's going on right now in East Asia and what this may mean, big picture wise, with the Chinese now having possible bottled water rockets. We're just going to call them that from now on. Right now, the North Koreans are getting very aggressive with South Korea. It's now the third day of artillery drills they've been conducting off of the west coast of South Korea, and it appears that there is going to be no end in sight to that at the moment, although it eventually will end. The North Koreans are getting extremely aggressive, and at the same time, we do know that the Chinese are taking a very passive-aggressive stance towards the Republic of China, which is also known by many people as Taiwan. The Chinese are trying to, I guess, provoke them is the best way I could explain it. I'm trying to figure out the proper wordage here. They're trying to provoke them by breaching their airspace multiple times. We've also seen that some of their helicopters have actually hovered off of the coast of Taiwan near their waters, possibly dropping off sonar buoys or maybe even dropping microphones in the water to try and see where the Republic of China's or Taiwan's submarines may be around the island. We know that right now, that has been an ongoing situation for nearly 2 years at this point, and it's always on and off, getting more tense and less tense, and kind of ebbing and flowing. At the same time, the People's Liberation Army Navy, called the PLAN, which is the Chinese Navy, the Communist Chinese Navy, is currently getting into pretty tough skirmishes. They're actually somewhat violent with Filipino fishermen who are currently fishing off the coast of the Philippines in the South China Sea, because the Chinese are trying to enforce this fictitious maritime border that was created by Mao Zedong way back at the beginning of time for communist China, which was around 1949. A lot has been going on.
I don't mean to interrupt you or anything like that, but I think, China is making a mistake. Obviously, they've made many mistakes over their whole government. In fact, their whole government is a mistake, if you ask me. But, the way they're expanding out and trying to go harass so many different people at one time, like Taiwan, they're harassing the people in the Philippines. China is overextending, and then they're trying to put their hand in the Russia-Ukraine situation. They're trying to put their hand in the Middle East. I think China is going to have so many things going on at once that it really can't focus on one single thing at a time. And they, in my opinion, that could lead to a mistake happening. For example, if they don't mean to escalate in the Philippines with their ships, colliding with other ships down there, they might do something by accident that leads to a bigger provocation, just because, China is so diverse and so widely spread right now with their provocations. It almost seems like they don't have a plan.
It doesn't, on the outside, it doesn't really look like they have a plan. It just kind of looks like they're being aggressive to all of their surrounding neighbors. But there is a plan out of all of these aggressive actions that they're trying to enact. And you'll actually notice this. This is actually really interesting. The farther away you get from China, because China is currently doing things in East Africa, in the Middle East, in Central Asia, and also in East Asia. But the farther away you get from China's borders, the nicer their interactions with countries are. But the closer you get to being in their sphere of influence, they're a lot more hostile. And I'll explain what we're talking about. The Chinese have invested heavily in East African infrastructure and have ended up building literally the national railway system of Uganda. They've also built massive dams and power works inside of a lot of East African countries as well, investing heavily and also maintaining incredibly large stakes inside of whatever infrastructure projects they're working on. And when I say infrastructure, I mean critical infrastructure. They literally own, the People's Republic of China, Communist China, literally owns the entire national railway system of Uganda. They have the majority stake in that railroad. So they can really do whatever they want and really swing Uganda whichever way they would need going on into the future. They've also built major dams inside of countries like Ethiopia, trying to build major sway there, and also give the Chinese a direct control over major infrastructure in that nation as well. And that's a very similar story for a lot of countries that are right here in this area of East Africa, all the way up from around the direction of Eritrea and all the way down towards Tanzania and maybe as far south as Mozambique in some rare instances. We're also seeing that they're doing something similar within Central Asia. The People's Republic of China has actually tried to tie itself in a very similar way to what they're doing in East Africa to the Middle East, and specifically Afghanistan. They've actually tried to get involved in funding Taliban-led projects inside of Afghanistan, but of course making sure that the Chinese will have a majority stake in the project once it's completed. We're seeing a lot of this stuff happening, but once you get within the area of East Asia where China is actually at, and it's not just some distant country just, helping out for the for posterity's sake, although there's a lot more of a sinister meaning behind what the Chinese are doing, although it looks nice, they're a lot more openly hostile. They're fighting with Filipino fishermen, they're breaching the airspace and waters of Taiwan, and they're supporting North Korea in a very soft way. But of course, North Korea is a massive destabilizing factor in this part of the world. All of this is a furtherance of something that China calls the Belt and Road Program, or the Silk Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Program is about a 20-year-long plan. It's going to last up until about 2040, 2050, where the Chinese are trying to build a sphere of influence that is going to surround the Indian Ocean. This sphere of influence is going to be one, at least in the Chinese mind, if everything goes correctly, that will be able to rival powers such as the West, which has, North America, Europe, and also some several Eastern European nations, well, not Eastern European, Eastern Asian nations behind them. The plan for China is that they'll be able to create a sphere of influence that will rival that, and not only that, will be foolproof. If you notice, all of the nations that they're working with in the Middle East, in Central Asia, in East Asia, and as well as in East Africa, they all surround the Indian Ocean. They create pretty much a self-contained pond of Chinese economic development and friends, and there's really no way, unless if the United States was able to find some way to plant itself dead in the middle of the Indian Ocean, that anyone would be able to interdict that prosperity going forward. And it's practically a foolproof plan for the Chinese. The Belt program is the one that largely deals with the nations that share a maritime border with the Indian Ocean. The Road program has to do with everything in Central Asia, heading all the way to Turkey. And we've even seen that the Chinese are trying to buddy themselves up with the Turks going forward, so that way they can try and create this truly indomitable sphere of influence in the area. The United States is currently trying to... go ahead.
Now, real quick, Enforcer, I was going to say I disagree with you on one thing. I don't think the Belt and Road Initiative is connected to their aggressions with Taiwan or the other countries, in my opinion. I think that's totally separate. And I think I'm not trying to give China advice here, by the way, but if I was running China, I would stick purely to the Belt and Road Economic Initiative and keep going with that, because to be honest, and just from a neutral perspective, China was actually making progress for their own, national interests by sticking solely to that program, which trapped poorer nations into basically being, subservient to China. But what they're doing now is they're trying to switch to an active, a power projection on Taiwan and the Philippines, harder than they ever have in the past. And they're also trying to build these artificial islands where they're launching planes from. And that is where they're going to make a fatal mistake, because that is going to lead to something that they don't really want. It's going to lead to a conflict with the United States, which is going to disrupt their basically silent lead up to power through their economic programs.
Now, that's a good point, Matthew, and you would largely be right. It's almost completely different looking than what they're doing everywhere else as a part of the Belt and Road program. It looks like it's detached. But here's the catch. The U.S. has actually published last year in 2023 the Department of Defense's, I think it was operational doctrine in the East Asian area, and it's a policy of complete containment of the Chinese expansion going on into the Indian Ocean. That's why you see that the United States right now, if you look a little bit deeper under the surface, we're building military bases in the Philippines. We're also building military bases on, I think it is Yonaguni Island right here, and I think we may be able to see that. I think we're actually expanding this airfield here and creating a U.S. Air Force base out of this. And I think we're building several more on the island chain that Japan controls all the way down to Yonaguni. The reason why we're doing all of this is because we are trying to contain the Chinese expansion outwards as best as we can. And the best place to do that is right inside the East China Sea and the South China Sea. And that's why the Chinese are getting so hostile in this area, because it is a race against time. For them to really be able to achieve their sphere of influence out here in the Indian Ocean, they have to be able to secure their small sphere of influence within East Asia. And a large part of that also means controlling Taiwan. Also for the semiconductors and all of the economic benefits that come with that. So they're trying to race against the clock as the U.S. military is trying to build up in this area and contain further Chinese expansion out of the area. They're trying to beat us and try and make sure that their sphere of influence is well founded, where the U.S. can't really do anything to stop it. So that's why they're acting very aggressively against...
Go ahead.
That's why they're acting very aggressively against the Philippines, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan, because all four of those countries are currently a part of a defensive pact where we're all working to try and contain the Chinese expansion outwards.
Now, one thing I think that China is lacking, China does not have the same, I'm not saying that they're not smart, because China has smart leadership, even though they're corrupt and crooked. They think of for their own self-interest, but they don't have the... I guess experience would be the appropriate word to say, as the United States when it comes to actually projecting and controlling their foreign policy to a large extent. I don't think China will ever be on the level of the United States in that regard. If they'd kept going with their economic Belt and Road program and focused solely on that, they might have overtaken the United States as an economic superpower, but I don't think China will ever rival our foreign policy projection. I don't think it's going to happen, at least for, the foreseeable future, like 10, 20 years.
I think if we sit back and we don't do anything, kind of like we're doing right now, beyond our East Asian containment policy, I think it may actually happen, because they are racing. I mean, they truly are going all in. That's why the Chinese Navy has grown so quickly over the past few years, to where technically now, just by the numbers, is larger than the U.S. Navy. They're really pushing to try and get this done, and it's a serious occurrence to me, and I would say that the Chinese certainly are a threat that I think the U.S. shouldn't take lightly. But beyond that, while we've been talking, Matthew and me have been discussing what we think about Chinese expansionist policies and everything like that, a lot of y'all have been talking about what the Chinese bottled water rockets are up to. And so, before we get back into Ukraine, I want to make sure that we see what is the majority opinion on the Chinese bottled water rockets. Are they real or are they not, according to all of y'all? So Matthew, what have people been saying?
All right, so the question is, do you believe that China's missiles are filled with water instead of fuel, as U.S. intel suggests? It looks like 33% said they're likely filled with water, 25% said unsure, 22% said they're likely filled with fuel, and 21% said it sounds like Western propaganda. And on this one, I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm a little bit unsure, because if their missiles are actually filled with water, I'm not saying it's not possible, but to me, just from a neutral perspective, it sounds a little bit like it might be propaganda, because, I don't think that China's in that desperate of a strait to start, stealing fuel out of the rockets. That sounds a little far-fetched to me. But then again, without more concrete proof, that's just simply my opinion and speculation. But I would tend to believe that's probably not true, just on a hunch. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would assume that it's tough to say, because right now I would rather take the U.S. intelligence community at face value, because they haven't really said anything that's incredibly wrong. It's been more so stuff stated by the Department of Defense that's been wrong up until this point, here and there. So I would say my initial inclination would be to take this at face value, but I think I'm going to have to fall within the 25% that say unsure and undecided, because a part of me says that would be absolutely insane, that a large amount of Chinese missiles do not have fuel in them, inside of them, and it's just water. So with that...
Yeah, I mean, is China really in that bad of a strait to start, robbing fuel out of their own rockets? I mean, I understand that China is not doing well economically, but At the same time, I don't think they're that desperate yet to start doing stuff quite as low down as Russia's doing at this point.
Yeah, I'm gonna withhold judgment on saying it's true or not at the moment. I'm gonna say I'm unsure, but it is certainly something very weird for the U.S. intelligence sphere to just publicly say. But with that, it's time for us to get back into Ukraine, because we've rabbit holed on the Chinese side of things for quite a while on the stream, and so I gotta make sure to get us back inside of Ukraine. And moving on into our location unknowns, we actually have some pretty interesting stuff to show y'all tonight. First off, we got to see a Russian ATV being chased off-road by an FPV drone, so here's the clip. Pretty cool intro. Chad music ensues. Ding, 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 ding. And we can see the ATV racing down the road, the FPV drone right behind it.
This is the CCO genius.
Man, and they really do be geniuses, you know what I mean? And that ATV, they dummies. You know what I mean? They about to become a target. And we can see the drone coming on in, right behind them. And they went off-road. Oh, I think they flipped. Oh, and they did. Oh my God.
Bliat.
Suka, bliat. Pistiki the nakui, bliat. Well, I think that's called a collateral kill right there, because the FPV truck didn't even hit it. But I swear I just saw the ATV do a somersault over the guy, so I think he's not good. And we see the FPV
Did that
drone.
thing actually survive that?
Oh, it looks like it may have a little bit, but now it's certainly not.
Oh, man. I think he broke his little leg.
My leg!
My leg!
Oh, my leg!
They're getting wild with these animations. Man, I'm telling you, they're putting a good portion of the military spending into these animations at this point.
Yeah, but a really weird clip, no doubt about it. But with that, we're also going to be seeing this clip here of a Ukrainian soldier predicting that a mortar is going to land right near him, and then it does. So here's the clip.
Oh. Ah, those ears are ringing strong.
Oh, tinnitus. It's not service related. But with that, we're moving on to our next clip, where we also got to see some pictures of some Ukrainian-made weapons. Some look pretty good, others don't. This is the Fort 28. And a lot of y'all are going to say, hey, that looks a lot like an FN-57 pistol. And you wouldn't be wrong, it actually shoots the 5.7 rounds, so it's like the Ukrainian equivalent of an FN-57 pretty much. But moving on from that, we also got to see this thing called the Fort 15. I'm not going to lie, I'm not really a big fan of this thing, but it is a pistol, so, you know, I guess it counts. Moving on from that, we also got to see the Fort 17R, which is a 9mm pistol. I'm not going to say, it does not look that bad. I would say the most comparable thing to it is like a Springfield compact pistol, at least in its design, like, philosophy externally. Moving on from that into the next picture, we got to see what I would call, like, the Ukrainian, like, 1911 equivalent. But it's not in 45 ACP, it's actually 9mm. This is the Fort 18R. Pretty interesting little Ukrainian pistol. I'm going to say not that bad looking. Moving on from that, we also got to see the Fort Sokol. I don't really know a lot about this pistol to tell y'all, but still an interesting looking one. Looks like the grip.
It comes with a compensator on it too already. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, that is pretty nice. It kind of looks like it's inspired a little bit from like an FN high power or a Browning high power, but still pretty interesting little pistol. Moving on from that, we also get to see the Fort Berkut. Looks like a larger version of the last Fort pistol that we just saw. We also got to see this thing called the Cortesia 125. Don't really know a lot about this one either. I would assume it's 9mm. This one, though, looks fairly basic. Still, you know, it's a
like that handle, man. It looks like it's been 3D printed with like how like rectangular and straight edge like the shapes are on it. Like even the like stippling on it is like a straight edge rectangle they just stuck on the side of it. I don't know about this one.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about that one. But moving on from that, we got to see this little thing called the Elf 1. And I got to... I'm not going to lie, y'all. I think this thing was... I don't think this thing is being used a lot. This thing was actually designed according to the caption in 1993, and we're seeing it as a museum piece. So I'm having a feeling that this thing was designed and produced in very limited numbers, and if any of these are in service, probably in service with reserve units. It looks like they attempted to make a Uzi submachine gun, but it ended up going somewhat badly.
They call this one dual use. They used it on the battlefield for work. Go back to it real quick. They used it on the battlefield for fighting people off, and then they went on their construction job and used it as a nail stapler.
But this one really is a nail stapler. This thing is called the Goblin. Yeah, but it's a 9mm submachine gun, and that's all I could say about it. It's not winning in the looks department much, I don't think, and you know it is what it is. Interesting to note, it was designed in 1995, and it's in a museum. But moving on from that, we also got to see this thing, which is the Elf 2. Apparently an improvement on the original Elf design that we got to see right here. This one does look far better, but at the same time, it looks like it was an imitation Uzi that didn't really make it that far. Gotta say, the thing's kind of clunky. We don't really get a good idea of scale here, so I don't know how big this thing really is, but kind of a little odd looking. Moving on
to shelf that Elf, and also they added some brown furniture pieces to it, like they got inspired by the good old gang days of Chicago and decided we're going to go gangster now and put some brown on it. But you know, it really does look like a ripoff of either a Mac 10 or 11 or whatever that model of gun is, like the old gangster like looking Uzi, or a legit Uzi.
I would say it does look like a mix of a Mac 10 and an Uzi. I think that's where the inspiration came from, but this is actually another Elf 2 that doesn't have all the fancy stuff on it, and in this form, it kind of looks a lot more like a Mac 10 to me, but an elongated Mac 10, but, you know, not really much to say on that one. But this one, though, is actually pretty cool. This is a Fort 226, which is a, like an Israeli Uzi, but extremely modified on roids. I gotta say, it's not that bad looking, but you know, still, it's an Uzi underneath, so, you know, it's kind of a little limited. But moving on from that into this picture, we also got to see a Fort 500, which looks a lot, to me, like a Mossberg 500. Like, it really does.
It's got the same little, like, guard on the top of it.
Yeah, it has the same heat shield on the top and everything. And to me, it just looks like a license build or a rip-off Mossberg 500. But moving on from that, we also got to see this thing, which is the Vepr 1. This is a bullpupped, the best way to explain it is this is a bullpupped AK-74, because you can actually see it still has the dust cover of an AK-74 back there, has the same compensator, it also has the same pistol grip that an AK-74 would have, and it also accepts AK-74 magazines. But this was a bullpup version. We have never seen these in service a lot, either by the Russians or the Ukrainians. Both of them made similar kinds. In Russia, this thing would actually be called a Groza, but we've never seen these used a lot, but still very unique designs and an interesting attempt to try and make the classic AK-74 into a bullpup rifle. They never ended up being successful, though. Moving on from that, we can then see what I would say are actually
that's
pretty
a
nice.
clever one.
This is, and oddly enough, Matthew, this is not an AR-15. These are actually AR-10s that shoot a 7.62 by 51mm cartridge.
Now, I'd actually like to get my hands on one of those, because I've always wanted an AR-10, like a legit-looking AR that shoots a bigger round like that. These look actually pretty nice. Like, I'll be honest with you, I totally am for Ukraine, but their firearms industry, based on the last ones, is really not up to spec like their drone industry is. But these right here they're very nice right here.
I would agree. These are incredibly nice looking. I don't know if the optics are Ukrainian made, but the optic also looks pretty nice on the top one right there. But moving on from that and into our next one, we also got to see the KT 12.7mm machine gun that Ukraine has been producing. But this is more so like a slight improvement on the already existent NSV machine gun that was used in the Soviet Union. So not really that, it's just more like a minor improvement. But moving on from that, we also got to see the NSV, which is what this thing kind of is. It's just a slight improvement of the NSV we're seeing right there. We also got to see this thing, which is the Laska K2 heavy machine gun. We actually showed this thing on stream about 8 months ago, but we haven't really heard a lot about it since, and we don't really know if this thing is being pushed into Ukrainian service. Still a very interesting belt-fed machine gun that shares a lot aesthetically with the Browning 50 cal machine gun. But moving on from that and into our next one, we can also see the Predator machine gun here looks a lot like an M249 SAW, and it also has the backpack mounted ammo belt, which is pretty cool. Moving on from that and into the next one, we can also see this thing. God knows what they were thinking. I'm not even going to lie. God knows what they were thinking when they took like the pistol lower and just put it onto a rocket launcher. But it's a thermobaric. It's a thermobaric rocket launcher used by the infantry. Pretty interesting design. But those are all of the Ukrainian-made weapons that we had here in this post. Very interesting looking. You gotta say, you can tell when they went from their 1990s out of the Soviet Union phase and into the modern world phase with these things. But beyond that, a very interesting look at some Ukrainian weapon designs. But moving on from that and into our next little bit of news, we also heard that sadly, due to the ongoing situation with U.S. support and foreign support, the Ukrainians are being outgunned at this part of the year, shell-wise. According to a statistic that came out from the Wall Street Journal, and we don't really know where they got the statistic, but we're just going to take it at face value, during the summer of 2023, the amount of shells being fired per day by both sides was 7,000 shells fired by the Ukrainians per day, and only 5,000 shells being fired by the Russians per day. Now, at the current time in the war, probably around late December, we saw that the Ukrainians are only firing around 2,000 artillery shells a day, while the Russians have somehow been able to manage firing 10,000 shells a day. A 100% increase for the Russians, and nearly I think it's like a 75% decrease well, actually it's less than that. It's like a 60% decrease in the Ukrainian volume of fire artillery-wise at this point in the war. This can end up posing massive problems, especially if this lasts for many months on end. And hopefully, the United States and many other countries can continue to understand that the upkeep of the artillery shell provisions is a very important thing in this war and will ensure that the Ukrainians can hold on, and not only that, possibly turn the tide due to artillery fire. Moving on from that little bit of news and on to our next one, we also got to see the Ukrainians are constructing brand new bunkers for the civilian population, so that way they can protect themselves even better during incoming Russian drone and missile attacks. These things actually look pretty nice, and there's even some talks about these possibly being put into Ukrainian trenches in somewhat inactive parts of the front lines to increase the ergonomics of the trenches and also infantry comfort more so.
Are those for private purchase or just for the armed forces?
I think this is for government purchase. So, trying to create government-built bomb shelters and also give soldiers on the line a protected bunker to sleep in at night in the trenches.
Yeah, I was about to say, because if it was for private purchase, I'm sure Ukrainians would love to have it. But I was about to say that looks pretty damn expensive because I thought they were for private purchase.
Oh yeah, I bet you these things are fairly expensive, but nevertheless, very interesting to see that the Ukrainians are trying to increase the survivability of both the citizens and the soldiers, and hopefully this will prove to be a worthwhile pursuit to make it sound all nice and legal. But anyways, moving on from that and into our last little bit of location unknown news, we also got to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours.
Oh, baby, we got 10 Bobcats. Let's go.
Let's get it, baby. And it's beautiful to see 10 Bobcats destroyed.
Damn. That's a big one. I think 11 or 12 was the highest I've ever seen before in a single day, if I remember correctly. But 10, that's on up there. All the other numbers are too, cleverly up there. I'm telling you.
Oh, hello there. Could I have a plum to go with it?
Oh, hello there. But still, the numbers are really high. 860 Russian troops wiped out, along with 22 armored personnel carriers, 45 supply trucks, an incredibly high number, along with 4 main battle tanks, 13 artillery systems, 36 drones, 1 MLRS, 4 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and of course the 10 special equipment vehicles. It was a very good day for the Ukrainian armed forces, and it's certainly showing in the casualty report as they were able to knock out a large number of Russian forces. But really quickly, while the Ukrainians have been able to knock out a large amount of Russian forces, the Lee Spring Army has been knocking out a large part of tonight's fundraiser, getting up to $2,300 at this moment. Absolutely.
That means we'll have 700 to go. Let's go, LSA.
Let's get it, baby.
Let's go. We're getting some respect around here. We're getting some respect.
Only $700 to go. We are not that far. We can actually make it. And I gotta say, truly impressive. I'm not gonna call a general order tonight because we're gonna take it easy. But I know the Lee Spring Army. Well, I'm not gonna bind myself to that. We might call a general order tonight, but I will put money on it that the Lee Spring Army will reach that $3,000 goal very soon. And remember, everyone, support for Ukraine is very important. And Razom For Ukraine is an amazing nonprofit organization that has been helping out inside of Ukraine for such a long time and has actually made massive impacts on what the lives of citizens in Ukraine are like. So many people on YouTube always focus on providing support to the armed forces of Ukraine, which is great and all, but I think the billions of dollars of support that the European Union and the United States is giving kind of makes that support redundant in a way, especially when it's just one drone or something small. No one gives any support to the Ukrainian citizens, however, and the Ukrainian government has pretty much been shouldered with the entire burden of pretty much trying to keep nearly 30 million people who are inside of Ukraine right now safe and alive. It is a massive burden, and one that they desperately need help in, more than any other category, more than helping the armed forces, more than anything like that. And it is something that we are focusing on right here on this stream. Everyone who's supporting this fundraiser tonight is helping out in probably one of the most difficult things that the Ukrainians are trying to take care of, which is their own citizens. And so I highly encourage that y'all support tonight. Like Darren Maynard, who threw in a 400 New Zealand, and Aaron Shu who threw in a 250. We are literally $180 away from the fundraiser goal. Can we make it? I bet you we actually can before the hour's out, because 80 bucks, not that tough. But huge thanks to both of y'all, and we'll be calling everyone out here in a little bit. But we're going to be moving on into the air defense, because what that air defense doing, Matthew? That's the big question. And the air defense...
Man, what's it doing? It's doing its job like it should be doing. That's what it's doing.
And it did a good job. It shot down all incoming Shahed 136s overnight, all 21 of them. A very good success, and showing that the Ukrainian air defense...
I can do better.
Oh, what? Oh, wait a minute. What?
There's always room for improvement.
And I'd agree. There's always room for improvement, but 100%, I don't think you can do better than that. Like, it's kind of tough. But moving on from that, we also got to see some pictures of a MiG-29 in the sky. This one was actually geolocated to the area near Bilazurka, which is where we put the marker on the map right there. But here's some pictures of this Ukrainian pilot. Look at him. He's just flying around, snapping selfies. He's just living the life, enjoying things. And I gotta say, he needs to enjoy it, because flying planes like that, you know it's got to be fun. You know it. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little bit of news right there and what the air defense was doing, because the air defense was doing a lot. And with that, we are now going to be moving on over into the Frontline news. Well, actually, really quickly, I'm going to be taking y'all down to something that I found a little odd today, because I was like, what the hell is this? What's going on down here? So Mariupol has been under Russian control for almost 2 years now. The Battle of Bakhmut lasted about 80 to 90 days, and the Ukrainian garrison inside the Azovstal surrendered, and the city has been under complete Russian control since then. So nearly 2 years at this point. Oddly enough, though, we got a video today saying that a broken armored group of the Russians was near Mariupol in the Donetsk Oblast, which is right there. And I was like, how in the world is this even possible? So... when you see the blue tape on the soldier, so that's a Ukrainian soldier. And there's the tank sitting there with the Z's on it. And when you see that it's a T-80 BVM. Actually, that's a T-72 B3, correction, right there. Now, when I saw this clip, I was like, how in the world would that happen today? Because the Ukrainian army is nowhere close to Mariupol at the moment. They're nearly 50 miles away. And the best thing I could say is that this had to have been from during the times of the Battle of Mariupol nearly 2 years ago, and the video finally just surfaced out of nowhere, and we're getting it today. It's like a ghost of a battle long since past. Oddly enough, nearly 2 years has passed since the Battle of Mariupol even began. We're almost coming up on the 2-year anniversary of the war altogether. So seeing a video like that from 2 years ago finally surface, where we're kind of looking at like the ghosts of things that may as well be far removed from us at this point, it's very bizarre to see. It's almost like looking into a glimpse of the past. And also, funnily enough, little story to share with you all about Mariupol. There was someone in the area here that I got to hear about that said that they were at the Battle of Mariupol. And they apparently had a picture to show. And the guy I knew, you know, he had dealt with him. I never dealt with the guy personally. But he showed me the picture, and I was like, there's no way in hell that's Mariupol, because that looks a lot like northern Kyiv. So I ended up geolocating the picture, and it turns out that the picture was actually from this little town right here, Berezivka. And the guy had never been in Ukraine, it turns out, and the picture was photoshopped. So that was a very interesting little thing, because I told the guy in the shop, I was like, nah, that does not look like Mariupol. That looks like northern Ukraine right there. And it turns out it was, and the picture was just fake, and it was photoshopped. So I was like, huh, that's wild, because I never run into anyone in real life who did stolen valor stuff until then. Hey!
Go!
Where's the goal, baby?
Let's see.
Let's get it, baby! We hit 3,000 even. It's literally the goal. Impressive
Mark
stuff.
did it. He put us up right to that exact amount. I don't know how he did it, because he did a currency translation. Somehow he did the math in his head. He got the number exactly on the dot. Huge shout out to you.
And a huge shout out to Mark. A huge shout out to everyone who made this fundraiser possible tonight. If it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't be able to help out in Ukraine the way we have. And I gotta thank y'all so much for that. And also, getting back to what I was saying, it just blew me away because I've never run into anyone who was stolen valor in real life. I never ran into a James Vasquez, and I never ran into them. Oh my God! Al Rose coming in with a 333 legend. And absolutely impressive, I must say. But getting off of that, back to this, I never ran into anyone who was stolen valor up until that point. I never got to meet him, never got to talk to him, but I was like, that is just wild. I don't know why people lie about that kind of stuff because, you know, once you're found out, it's like, what was it all for? I don't even get it. But anyways, with that, it is now time for us to move on into that Northern Front news. But before we do, a lot of people have been talking about, you know, those guns that we saw in the location unknowns. And a lot of y'all have some interesting inputs to make about those Ukrainian-made weapons that we saw. A lot of them are from different times in Ukrainian history, though. Some of them are from, like, the early 90s, when they were going through a massive amount of economic trouble, and therefore they didn't really have a lot of a budget to produce their own weapons. And then some of them come from the modern day, where the Ukrainians actually do have a budget to create weapons, and also Western backing to do so as well. So, what have people been saying about this hodgepodge of weapons from across Ukraine's weapon development history, Matthew?
So the LSA critters be saying in response to the question, what do you think of Ukraine's firearm manufacturing industry in reference to their design, etc.? 35% said it seems all right, but not excellent. 24% said unsure. 22% said it's very similar to the U.S. market. And 19% said it's subpar with a few exceptions. And on this one, being perfectly honest, I would say it seems all right, but not excellent. It seems like there are a few key exceptions. For example, that AR-10 that we saw that shoots a 308 round, that would be one exception of a very nice weapon that they make in Ukraine. And also, my question to the audience is this. Is the Snipex Alligator a good enough looking massive gun to redeem the entire Ukraine firearm manufacturing industry? It could be. I could see a good argument for that because that is a unique gun on its own. And I haven't seen one that large for that purpose anywhere else in the world. And size does matter when it comes to guns, and I think that that one might take the cake. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that, in my opinion, Ukrainian weapons are all right, but they're not excellent. And of course, nowadays, with the Ukrainians producing things like AR-10s and AR-15 style rifles, we now have to start comparing them to a Western standard, not a European, well, not an Eastern European standard like the former Soviet Union. And going off of that, I would say their weapons are good, but they're not great. And I know that's a little bit weird to say, you know, because, you know, everyone always wants to be positive about Ukraine. But I can't really say that the Ukrainians' weapons, like the Snipex Alligator, are on the equivalent of something like the Barrett M82. Because while the Snipex Alligator is huge and it shoots a 14.5 millimeter round, the Barrett M82 seems to be better designed to me, and I'll show y'all why. You know, and I'm sure people are gonna be like, well, duh, it's Barrett. But you know, we're comparing them to the Western world, so you know, you start playing big ball at that point. So let me go get the Barrett M82 right there, and then let me go get the Snipex Alligator right here. So the Snipex Alligator is a bolt fired 14.5 millimeter rifle. The Barrett M82 is a semi-automatic 50 caliber anti-material rifle. Both of them are technically anti-material rifles, but we're going to call them snipers because that's how they're really used. But I would say, and also this one's kind of beat up, because this one's actually used by the IDF, and then they just took a picture of it, you know, and put it up here. So this one's actually been field used, and this one looks like it may be like a range rifle or something, but it's in very good shape. But out of the two, I would say that the Barrett M82 would probably still win. Just because largely it's a weight thing at this point. This Alligator is not light. This thing weighs, and I think it has the weight around here, 55 pounds. The Barrett M82 weighs, let me make sure, 29.7 pounds or up to 32 pounds. So this one is actually usable in the field. You know, like it's heavy as hell, no doubt about it. But an infantryman could carry this thing around, or a recon sniper could carry this thing around if you wanted to. This thing is so heavy that you'd kind of have to load this thing into the back of a truck and probably have a crew of 2 guys carry this thing around and then set it up. And that could
What's the range difference between the two, by the way? Because I noticed that the barrel on the Alligator is massive, Like, it must have a pretty good range compared to the Barrett.
Let's see. Effective firing range for the Barrett M82, and it's not differentiating on Wikipedia of the different barrel lengths that you can get the M82 in, because I think there's a 20-inch and a 27-inch version. But it's saying here that the effective firing range of the Barrett M82 is around 2,000 yards. For the Snipex Alligator, the effective firing range is 2,000 meters, which is 6,600 feet. But we don't have a yard calculation there. So let me go meters to yards. And so let's see here. 2,000 meters. So we want to put in 2,000. So this one...
Oh, it's roughly the same.
Yeah, this one can only shoot just about another 180 yards out from the Barrett M82. You know, going off of that, you're looking at a massive weight difference. It's 50% heavier than the Barrett M82, but it can only fire about another 150 yards farther accurately. So when
I would have assumed that the key feature to the Alligator was that the range and also the accuracy was immensely improved is the massive barrel. But considering there's really not a difference that I can tell between any of the characteristics of the gun, you know, I'm not really seeing exactly what the big deal is about it, rather than it being significantly more heavier and is looking more cool.
I don't really think there is a big difference in between the Barrett M82 and the Alligator. Maybe one of the only, and we don't have armor ballistics penetration values for either of these rifles. I know that the Barrett M82 can punch through, I think, 40 millimeters of armor, you know, somewhere around there if you're giving it an armor-piercing slap round, but I don't know what the Alligator could do, considering it's a 14.5 millimeter round. It may be able to penetrate more armor, but at that point, you know, it's kind of starting to enter a field that's already obsolete, which is the anti-tank rifle field. The anti-tank rifles don't exist anymore. They died at the beginning of World War II because the armor just got too thick for an anti-tank rifle to be effective. And so, you know, at that point, it's like, why have the Snipex Alligator as an anti-APC rifle? You could just whip out any cheap RPG-7 and take out that BMP just about the same, probably even more efficiently. So going off of that, I would say it's cool, but, you know, when you compare it to the Western world, you know, the ergonomics of the M82 and how easy it is to carry because it's, you know, a lot lighter, I would say that I would say that they're good, but they're not the most amazing things ever. They're not H&K Space Magic levels of amazing. They're great, but, you know, I wouldn't put them up there on that pedestal just yet. I'm sure that'll take some more time, though, because the Ukrainians are certainly trying to gear up towards, you know, being an arms provider. They've already made that clear. Zelensky, at least, has made that clear in the past. But with that, I hope that does address that poll the best I can, at least in my opinion. And also, Matthew, I would like to take a moment, considering that we have not only passed the fundraiser goal, but we've gotten well above it at this point. We are at $3.5 thousand raised, which is absolutely incredible. Could we take a moment to appreciate all of the folks who've made it possible above $50?
Indeed. So let's go ahead and start off by appreciating Hal Rose, who threw in the biggest donation of the night thus far. It's a $333 donation. And big shout out to you, Hal, and for taking the first place trophy for now. And that is a massive amount to donate, by the way, and that helped us get to $3,500. So huge thanks, Hal. Also, huge thanks to DCC Prime 1, who was in second place, who put in a $300. Also massive support, along with Aaron Shue, who put in a $250, along with Darren Maynard. And then we had a $200 from Say What. Then we had a $200 from Snow White Sigant. And then we had a $100 from John Albrecht, Darren Maynard once again. Then we had a $100 from Mark the Kinetic Possum, a $100 from BCR, as well as a $54 from Paramecium 13, Heather Fitzgibbon, Greg Carrier, Neil Vizanot, Dad Good, Renee Love, Praise Adonai, SMM814 Me, as well as Cliff H, Charles Hazlitt, and also Mike Smith. And huge shout out to all of those top donors we just listed off, and also huge shout out to all the ones we weren't able to list off that were less than $50, because, like we always say every single Sunday for almost 2 years now, it's always adding up to help us get to the total figure that we have here. I'm telling you what, we can't do math, but I do see the number, and it's definitely above 3,000. So huge shout out to you all, and Enforcer, what say you?
And a huge shout out to everyone who was supporting the fundraiser tonight and who still is. Y'all have done an amazing job getting us well over that fundraiser goal, and not only that, helping to save the lives of people over in Ukraine. y'all are making a massive impact tonight. Not only that, y'all are helping out in the war effort in a real, meaningful way. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our little bit of Frontline news. We got some.
Wait, what about the
Frontline-
questions?
The questions?
Questions,
crap.
man.
Yeah, let's get some questions. Why not?
All right. So also, before we get our first question, I want to say shout out and happy birthday to Matt Latcha, who told me at the beginning of the stream it's his birthday. We hadn't called off a happy birthday in a long time. So happy birthday to you, Matt.
Happy
and
birthday.
also, I don't know if you're as old as me, because this Matt on this side of the stream is getting very old, about a few thousand years old at this point. Hopefully Matt is a lot younger than that. And also, I hope you're having a good birthday. And with that being said, we're moving on to our first live chat question, which goes to Panama Floyd, who says someone on YouTube, who we're not going to name, is reporting that Magyar's birds are over near the bridgehead near Krinky. What have y'all heard?
We have heard that is true. I will say, though, if I'm saying this as in, because I don't know a lot about the statement. If that statement was made today, you couldn't put in less effort if you tried, because Magyar actually announced that they were moving to that area in October of last year, at least, or well before that. I remember at least in October of last year, that was when we had our first clip on the channel showing that they were operating in the Krinky area. So if that statement was made today, that's so behind the curb that it's sad. But in general, the statement is true. The Magyar's Birds unit is in the area of Krinky, and we have seen a lot of their operations inside of the Aleski forests as they're trying to help out the Ukrainian Marine brigades that are fighting on that side of the river. So with that, I hope that does address that well, but that is true. Magyar is in that area along with the unit, Magyar's Birds. They've been there for a very long time at this point, months on end. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Selma Guerrera Murillo, who says, what do you think about Kadyrov's proposal about lifting his family's sanctions in exchange for Ukrainian prisoners?
I would say that it's laughable because it's like, one, he doesn't have the authority to give up Ukrainian prisoners from Russian captivity. I think that's something that falls directly into the Ministry of Defense, which he isn't really an official part of. But I think it's funny because it's maybe showing that he's running into financial troubles and he's going broke and he's like, I need the money done. I need the sanctions are lifted done. And nobody's going to lift the sanctions on him because you know what's going to happen is if they lift the sanctions on him personally, the Russian oligarchs are going to use him as a way to circumvent the sanctions. They're going to give him money to go buy the stuff they want. He'll buy it because he's, doesn't have any sanctions on him, and then he just gives it to the other folks. So
it's like those young kids that go up to the folks that are staying outside the gas station like, will you go in and buy some alcohol for me, please? I said, yeah, sure, son. Let me go get you some of the alcohol. And then come back out and get arrested.
Hey, excuse me, sir. Could you give me the strawberry daiquiri vape?
But yeah, I would say no. I don't think the sanctions would be lifted, and that's a silly proposition by that fella. Just absolutely crazy. But still, with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into that Frontline news.
All right, and also shout out to Gene Kustra, who put in a 50 Canadian to the fundraiser and brought us up to 3.6 thousand raised. So huge shout out, Gene. Hey! And also our last question will go to Mad Machine, who says, could Ukraine sell war bonds and items made from destroyed orc armor with the location, weapon used, and date stamp on the item somewhere like key fobs to help their economy? And Mad Machine, they could, and that's the type of creativity I was talking about yesterday. If Ukraine wants to support their economy, they can come up with ways like that, which will raise significant amounts of funds, because I'm sure a ton of people would buy that, and that could help support their whole operation. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, they could do that. That would certainly support a lot of operations inside of Ukraine. I think a decent amount of folks have started to do something like that, but it's to varying levels of success. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, it's now time for us to move on into the Frontline news, because we have some very interesting things to show y'all tonight. Starting off in the northeastern area, because not a lot's been going on here, we got to see a picture of the Special Forces of the 3rd Separate Special Purpose Regiment near Kupiansk. Really cool picture. Pick goes hard. Feel free to screenshot. Moving on from that and into our next little bit of news in the area, we also got to see the Russian main battle tank got disabled in the area. Okay, we're going to be muting that. But anyways, we can see the tank rolling along. Here comes the FPV drone. And the tank's just rolling. It gets hit right on the engine bay. That thing is smoking. Comes to a stop, and the crew is bailing out. Look at him go. And that's the end of that clip. Wonderful to see. Beautiful to know. And with that, we're now moving on from that little clip and on into our next one near the area of the Kremena Forest, where we also got to see Russian forces getting hit down here. See him setting up their drone.
Being real sneaky about it.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. It's in copyright. Boom. Oh, it was right on the cue. But they were with the grenade, and now they're dropping a little smoke grenade on top of them. Marking it for the artillery. Blat!
Oh, it's yellow. Oh. You know what yellow is for?
Gonorrhea.
Cowards, yeah.
Yeah, yellow boy. And they're running, too. Apparently they are cowards. Man, look at them. It's like, Zoink Scoop, we need to run. Run.
They're running along screaming for their mommies. Mama!
Mama! But anyways,
Except the Russian said, Mama, please cry. It ain't going well out here. Please cry, I'm telling you.
Oh man, I'm telling you. But moving on from the Kremena Forest and on down to the area of Sperny, we also get to see Russian forces getting hit down here. We see them dropping the nades right on top of a sleepy Russian, and it looks like he's really sleeping. And we can see them dropping another one. We see a couple of guys out there, they're sleeping, and now he's joined them. We see Russian forces getting hit out there. We can see their BMP rolling through the fields. And the BMP is about to have to stop because the Russians BMP. I don't know what the hell I was meaning by that joke, but we can see the BMP sitting there. And we now see the Ukrainian soldier chucking nades at these Russians, these pesky Ruskies. And he got the first one dead on the nail.
The Ukrainians sitting down there in the trench talking about, get your free grenades here, they're hot and ready, have one, bing bing. I know a hot dog seller to be good at this job.
Get your hot dogs over here. Side of cocaine baggies on the side.
Oh.
I'm going to go root for my losing football team and sell these hot dogs over here. Hot dogs, cocaine baggies, $5 a gram. Oh, and look, the Russians, they're getting a couple of grams as well. They're going to be posted on the gram. Slow. But anyways, we're wilding tonight. We're just going a ham tonight. Really no format, no nothing. We're just hanging in here. I hope y'all are enjoying it tonight. But moving on from that and down into the Bachman area, there was a little bit of action down here. Call it that kind of action. Well, it's that kind of action that raises eyebrows, especially for the Russians. It's like midgets and chalkboards just really rocks the world when they hear about it, because the Russians are once again making no progress at all, and it looks like they're getting beat kind of badly. So I'm going to start y'all off with the first clip of a Ukrainian soldier getting a little war trophy here, which is 10,000 rubles, equivalent to about 110 bucks, according to the title, but I'm calling cap. We're going to have to pull up the ruble to dollar translator. Ruble to dollar. 10,000 rubles is equivalent to literally $110. So it is not cap. That is true. So that's 110 bucks right there. 10,000 rubles. Impressive stuff. But
I'd love to see this guy go to the store. He has no face.
man, he goes in there. He goes in there. You're like, man, you play poker because you don't show your face. He's like, yeah.
I have a feeling if this guy showed up, he'd get anything he wanted, regardless of the rubles.
Man, I'm telling you what, he probably... Also, I like that AR... Well, that's not an AR. That's a really modded out AK-74 right there. Nice. Nice. I like the little M-lock rail he's got. Yeah, really nice. But moving on...
I love suppressor wrap. Real clever.
Man, that's a wrap. But anyways... Oh, what the hell happened
Whoa!
right there?
Whoa! The screen went totally black.
Dude, that freaked me out, man. I was absolutely tweaking. But moving on from that, we also got to see the Ukrainians using a demining charge in the area. You see him setting it up.
He opened that thing like a vinyl record.
Boof! Look at that. Man, and that thing was as smooth as a vinyl record, too. But moving on from that, and on to our next little bit of news. Now, down near Avdiivka, we got to see the Ukrainians fighting the Shaheds, specifically the Fighting 93rd, the famous Fighting 93rd, fighting the Shaheds. Moto Life Ukraine. Get him, baby!
Я думаю, что это по дронам.
Man, right now some UFO conspiracy theorist out in New Mexico is going, "It's the UFOs! They're here!"
The damn media, they're trying to make you think that the shadow people are in the Miami Mall.
There's a whole fleet of UFOs, one after the other, flying in sequence.
Did you see that goofy crap though? I'm like, all seriousness about everyone saying there were some shadow people in the Miami Mall, and then the video finally.
I saw that.
Yeah, and then the video finally came out, and these stupid kids setting off firecrackers in the middle of the mall.
Some people were actually believing that crap. I thought people knew it was a joke, and I think a good portion of people did, but some people were like, seriously, like, is there something running around Miami? It's like, what do you think? Do you really think that? This is Twitter. I mean, come on.
Dude, I saw some crazy crap coming out, man. Someone said, dude, if you inverse the coordinates, believe it or not, it was in the middle of Antarctica, I swear. And I was like, do you think, like, aliens, if they were real, would use our coordinate system? Like, come on. It's like, that's just stupid.
Man,
but
I've heard of Miami called a lot of things, but I've never heard it called Antarctica.
Me either. That's just, I'm not even gonna lie. But man, look at this. I mean, this really ambience of the battlefield here. Something else.
Actually, I take it back about the Miami comment. If they called Antarctica, they're probably talking about the below.
Oh! Call the snow day. All the kids are getting out of school.
And hot dog sellers love to go there.
Man, hot dog sellers are truly tweaking, man. They're scratching the skin off their necks for that kind of a snow. You know what I mean? But also, by the way, y'all, I mean, like, while we're talking about snow and everything, we got to give a huge credit to all the Ukrainian forces, the amazing brigades that have been fighting through this very snowy weather in Ukraine. And United 24 probably made one of the longest videos we've ever seen today. It's about 18 minutes long, and it talks about all of Ukraine's top fighting brigades in one video. So you've got the Azov, the 3rd Assault Brigade, Kraken, Magyar's Birds, Da Vinci Wolves, all in one go. Now let me make sure that these are all one video. So let me check. Check. I gotta double check this, y'all. Okay, so yes, this is a specially made video. I had to make sure it wasn't a montage of them all. So here's the video. It's a little long, but we will be with y'all the entire way.
We're not tired of war. We do not want a break. We want to get ours back, our land, our homes, and our families.
When the 3rd Assault Brigade arrived at its position, they engaged in their first combat encounter on the very first night, which was the beginning of nearly continuous confrontations.
It was almost round-the-clock assaults lasting up to 12 hours at a time. The guys operated without sleep. The enemy was 15-20 meters away.
For months, they defended the city against the overwhelming Russian forces.
During the night, Miron could use up to 2 boxes of grenades. I constantly heard him on the radio saying, "We need grenades, we need grenades."
Among their notable missions is the defense of the so-called Road of Life, which served as a lifeline for supplying the defenders of Bakhmut. At one point, the Russians were entrenched near the road, but the regiment's fighters executed a swift attack, dislodging them from their positions.
We would move 10-15 meters, stand down, and immediately they would hit the spot where we had just been. As soon as we moved a bit more, they would hit the previous spot again. They were constantly trying to knock us out with unguided missiles, 120mm mines and grads.
In early May, the leader of the Wagner PMC, declared by the United States as a transnational criminal organization, acknowledged that the 72nd Brigade of the Russian Army had fled from its positions near Bakhmut.
We have just visited our positions and have heard what is happening. Our army is on the run.
This resulted in the loss of several kilometers of fortifications and 1,000 soldiers for the occupying forces. This is just one of the successful combat operations of the 3rd Assault Brigade. They stepped forward as volunteers to defend Ukraine on the first day. Among them were the veterans of the legendary Azov, so they formed a territorial defense battalion, adopting the name of their former unit. For a period, Ukraine witnessed the coexistence of two distinct Azov units, each operating independently and now having different designations. Within a matter of weeks, the battalion underwent restructuring and emerged as a separate Special Forces regiment. In the following days, the newly formed unit, together with the 72nd Brigade, executed an ambush on a Russian tank regiment near Kyiv. Intercepted communications revealed that the occupiers lost nearly an entire regiment. Over the next month, the new Azov, alongside allied units, successfully liberated crucial settlements surrounding Kyiv, including Vasilkiv, Irpin, Bucha, Hostomel, and Moshchun. In January 2023, the Special Operations Forces of the Volunteer Regiment officially became the third separate assault brigade within the armed forces, continuing their active involvement in the most intense areas. The brigade comprises tank, artillery, air defense missile units, and is even equipped with semi-improvised ground drones armed with explosives. The brigade consists of highly motivated fighters, among whom are notable Ukrainian individuals.
We have a very good team. Newcomers quickly become part of the team because we live like little families here now, so to speak.
Nothing brings you closer together and nothing knits you tighter to each other than realizing you could die today. This is probably a very, very strong factor that brings us all together.
Я тоже 300, наводчик 200, мій ход поки не знаю. Що в нього? Що в нього? Быстрей, сука!
The people here are more conservative, I'd say. They are nationalists. They are patriots of their country. And they are ready to change this country for the better.
In under a year, this unit swiftly evolved from infantry trenches near Kherson into a unique combat force, a company of attack drone pilots. Headed by an entrepreneur and an official, this group of pilots has already destroyed hundreds of enemy armored vehicles.
One well-equipped attack drone company is capable of destroying over 100 enemy armored vehicles each month. And we have proved this by our example.
While initially the group created by Magyar did not have a single professional military or drone, the intensity of the war was such that on occasion his unit made 50 sorties per day. The result is an incredible efficiency. For instance, in early June 2023, the group destroyed or damaged 35 enemy armored vehicles in just 4 days. Overall, they have destroyed more than $1 billion worth of enemy equipment. The FPV drones are one of the Magyar Bird's trump cards. However, they also have other vehicles in active service. Among these is the R-18, an octocopter developed by Ukrainian volunteers. It can lift ammunition weighing up to 5 kilograms, which it then drops on the enemy from a height of up to 300 meters. Detailed characteristics of the drone are not disclosed, but it is known that it can operate at a distance of up to 4 kilometers from the operator and spend about 40 minutes in the air. The unit's primary objectives include enemy detection, frontline patrolling, fire adjustment, and launching attacks. Magyar himself shortens this into his unit's motto, Eyes and Sting. He recently demonstrated how well these eyes work. A Ukrainian drone showed one of the symbols of Donetsk, which has been occupied since 2014, the famous 5-star Donbass Arena Stadium, which opened in 2009. As for the Sting, see for yourself.
My boy Magyar, he's doing great work.
Ah, there it was!
These fighters are also working on technological advancement.
We are actively training a neural network with footage to detect and identify enemy personnel and equipment that remains hidden from the naked eye. Our objective is for it to recognize helmet or machine gun outline.
In the meantime, the soldiers keep an eye on their screens to bring victory closer. Following the counteroffensive on Kherson, they fought for 110 days straight near Bakhmut. They continued to be an invisible terror from the skies for the enemy. This is the story of the Da Vinci Wolves, former volunteers who became one of the most formidable units of this war. Eastern Ukraine, Zaporizhia and Kherson in the south, Chernihiv region in the very north. They're hundreds of kilometers apart, and they're also the hotspots where Da Vinci Wolves unit managed to fight during the very first month of the full-scale invasion. From the very beginning, they rushed into battle in the most dangerous locations, as for them, the war had started long before February 2022. In 2014, Russia seized Ukrainian Crimea and launched a hybrid war in the east. The situation was threatening. In response, thousands of volunteers stood up to defend their homeland, including a teenager named Dmitro Kotyubailo, who had just turned 18. He had neither combat experience nor served in the army, but his courage, motivation, and desire to learn quickly made him a leader. First, he led a squad, and then a company. Soon, this unit was called the Da Vinci Wolves, all because of the call sign of the young commanding officer. Before the war, Dmitro Kotyubailo dreamed of becoming an artist and studied at an arts high school. In 2021, he became the youngest person to receive the highest national decoration, the Hero of Ukraine. Since 2014, the Da Vinci Wolves have been fighting in some of the most intense battlegrounds, including Pisky, Avdiivka, and Savur-Mohyla. After the full-scale invasion, the Da Vinci Wolves emerged as one of the most capable units. They were tasked with the most difficult assignments in different areas of the front line, including the famous Kharkiv counteroffensive and the liberation of Balaklia, Kupiansk, and Kupiansk-Vuzlovy. Da Vinci Wolves were at the forefront of implementing truly modern warfare tactics. They were among the first to leverage commercial drones such as the DJI Mavic for reconnaissance and fire adjustment on the front line. Da Vinci himself always stressed the need for terrain study and thorough planning, leading to the Wolves consistently having the lowest casualties among their peers. Most of the equipment used by the Wolves was captured from the enemy. Initially, they only had 120mm mortars, but they acquired heavier weapons through their battles. Alina Mikhailova, the fiancée of Da Vinci and the head of the Wolves Medical Service, recalled it this way.
Regrettably, we have not yet received any artillery systems, though we repeatedly requested at least M777 howitzers. Instead, we are making use of captured equipment, so-called Lend-Lease, from the Russians.
In 2023, the Wolves have been performing combat missions in the toughest areas, including defending the Road of Life, the only supply route to Bakhmut that is constantly under fire. Regrettably, it was there that one of the tragedies of this war occurred. On March 7, 2023, 27-year-old Dmitro Kotyubailo Da Vinci died while helping journalists and soldiers take cover during a shelling. The injuries that Da Vinci sustained during the attack proved fatal. His comrades continued to carry on with this mission. Once artists, engineers, and teachers, they now serve as soldiers in a battalion with the legendary name that has become renowned worldwide: Da Vinci Wolves.
Release the Kraken!
This phrase found its second life thanks to the mysterious unit, which emerged from nowhere and became one of the fiercest at the front lines. Volunteers who started with regular cars a year ago now operate tanks as a separate reconnaissance unit. True chaos reigned in the first day of the full-scale invasion as Kharkiv suffered massive bombardment. Large enemy columns approached the Ukrainian metropolis near the Russian border from the north. Under those circumstances, a group of gloomy men has gathered in Kharkiv. There were mainly local football fans and their acquaintances. Together, they stood up to defend the city. Among them were recon officers, veterans of the acclaimed Azov, and other experienced fighters. The main Directorate of Intelligence agreed to provide some light arms, a few machine guns, and mortars. That's how Kraken was born.
In the second half of the day, on February 24th, we took up positions at North Saltivka, the most dangerous direction at that time. They were already breaching through it. The 92nd Brigade was holding it, but the defense was already breached. That's where we sent the reinforcements to.
A few days later, they were already dislodging Russian special forces from a school they captured near the city center. In a week, 2 Russian caliber missiles hit the city's defense headquarters, where Kraken was also dislocated. According to the official report, 29 people died. Yet the volunteers remained unwavering. By March, they reclaimed Vilhivka village. Further, in April, they liberated the important town of Ruska Lozova. As it was later revealed, the head of the main Directorate of Intelligence, Kirilla Budanov, took part in that operation as well. The army officials were so impressed by the mission that a spontaneous formation became a part of the main Directorate of Intelligence and received a new status, a separate reconnaissance and sabotage unit, Kraken. In 2022, Kraken helped liberate more than 20 Ukrainian towns and villages. This number includes such big towns as Kupiansk and Balaklia. One of the main features of Kraken is a thorough preparation of every operation. For example, before the assault on Balaklia, Ukrainians learned that Russians lacked power generators. This is when Kraken captured the local power plant and turned the power off. Russians found themselves without connection and electricity, allowing the volunteers to successfully attack the panicking enemy. For effective operation planning, Kraken actively uses UAVs. That includes the Black Hornet, tiny helicopters that weigh around 20 grams. They're silent enough to approach a human at a 1-meter distance and remain undetected. Moscow has reported eliminating Kraken a dozen times. Destroyed? Well, maybe in the dreams of Russian propagandists. Kraken keeps fighting in the hottest spots. Strict selection and high motivation to liberate their land made Kraken one of the most successful units of this war. Former football fans and volunteers keep fighting. Release the Kraken. The time for vengeance has come.
The Kraken.
Well, we're on to the last unit, I believe, and that one is the Azov. Hey, there we go.
You notice also, by the way, Enforcer, real quick, that the poll that's currently running, every time a single unit gets mentioned that's in the poll, all of a sudden their numbers start rising every time they speak about them.
Yeah, I've noticed it. It's pretty good. But let's get on to this one, because it looks like this might be the one that a lot of people are looking forward to, which are the Azov units that some of them are currently fighting in the Kremenna forest right now against the Spetsnaz. So let's take a listen.
An eminent unit of the Ukrainian army that defended Mariupol for months despite complete Russian encirclement. In May 2014, a group of volunteers formed a police battalion in the southeastern town of Berdyansk. It is named after the Azov Sea, which washes the southeast of Ukraine. In the beginning, this battalion counts 400 people. None of them are paid, most don't have combat experience, and nearly a half are students. They wear balaclavas and go by the call signs instead of names, all because most of them came from the east of Ukraine, often having relatives who live in the cities captured by the Russian proxies. After a month of training, Azov advances toward the captured Mariupol, engaging in urban combat. Motivated Azov recruits fight to their full power. In one day, Azov liberates the city that many of its members call home. A year after the full-scale invasion in 2022, Russian troops have not achieved a single objective and suffered several painful defeats. Great merit in ruining Russia's plans belongs to Azov, which has grown from a volunteer battalion of police to the National Guard Brigade, one of the fiercest combat units of our time. In 2022, Russia planned to quickly capture the Azov shore to form a land corridor to Crimea. It didn't go as planned, as the garrison of 4,500 defenders of Mariupol, half of which were from Azov, became an obstacle.
26 лютого, 10 година ранку, місто Маріуполь. Полк Азов разом з Збройними силами України, Національною гвардією та іншими силовими структурами надійно обороняє місто Маріуполь. Ми будемо битися до останньої каплі крові. Нам не страшні, а не ворожі танки, а не ракетні удари, а не ворожа авіація. Я наказую кожному бійцю полку Азов битися до останнього. Ми будемо знищувати росіян у повітрі, на землі та на воді. Разом до перемоги. Слава Україні!
Eventually, Azov retreated to Europe's biggest metallurgical plant, 3 times the size of New York's Central Park, the Azovstal. After a few months under the siege, Azovstal, named after the sea just like Azov Regiment, remained the only place in Mariupol with the Ukrainian flag waving above it. The defenders of Mariupol ended up in Russian captivity. Putin promised to save their lives, but it was another Russian lie. On the night of July 28th, an explosion happened in the Olenivka settlement prison, where Azov fighters were held. More than 50 people died. In September 2022, 215 soldiers, including 108 Azov fighters, returned home after prisoner exchange. Commanders of Azov were exchanged to 55 Russian soldiers. By an agreement, they will stay in Turkey till the end of the war. The story of Azov continues. Just like back in 2014, motivated fighters stand up to defend their country again. All this time, veterans and recruits keep fighting.
Азов не повертається, Азов нікуди не зникав. Сюрприз. Ми весь цей час воювали. Навіть коли ми були в полоні, ОЗСП Азов воював.
They continue fighting for their dream, the liberation of their homeland from the occupants.
Що мотивує далі боротися. Тут, отсюда, 100 километров до моего родного дома, до Мариуполя. По чуть-чуть, но мы идем вперед, я иду домой.
And that's the end of that mammoth video right there. But talking about some of Ukraine's fighting units out there on the lines that have been doing amazing work the entire time. And I thought it was a perfect time to throw it in during our Bakhmut segment, because that's where the 3rd Azov Brigade is currently fighting at this very moment, along with the famous Fighting 93rd, which sadly didn't get a mention in that video, but I believe should be an honorary mention in the video because they are an incredible unit as well. Moving on from that, we also got to see some rare pictures of the Chulpan mortars that Ukraine has firing at the Russians. Much like the Russians, the Ukrainians have these. They're Soviet vintage, but we rarely see them in service, and these are the few pictures that we've ever seen of the Ukrainian Tulpans firing on the Russians. Moving on from that, a little bit of news right there, and closer towards Avdiivka, we also got to see the Ukrainians shooting down a Lancet. As Activista shoots down a 250 on the Fundraiser like a legend. When you see them firing up the Lancet, and there it goes. What a shot. Very impressive. Moving on from that into our next little clip, we also got to see that the Russians are trying to upgrade their Scooby-Doo vans, at least a little bit. They're adding these electronic warfare jamming systems on top of the trucks to try and help them survive the battlefield, but that's probably not going to work out all too well, because it looks like it may just be omnidirectional towards the front of the Scooby-Doo van. Moving on from that and into the only clip we got from Avdiivka today, we got to see that the Ukrainians were able to take 4 Russian prisoners of war, including a foreign mercenary here on the far right side. Interesting, and nice to know that the Ukrainians are still taking prisoners and adding them to the prisoner exchange fund. Moving on out of Avdiivka and a little bit further south, we also got to see that down in the area of Stary Mayor, some Ukrainian soldiers were enjoying some downtime, especially with their cat. Check it out. Watching YouTube together, chilling, grilling. You know what I mean?
Не може поняти, куди вона дівається.
Nina. What are they watching?
I don't know. But the cat's enjoying it, that's for sure.
Also, they're staring at an empty hallway like a live stream or something.
Man, there's a lot of jokes to be made there, but I'm not going to make them. Anyways, moving on for that into our next clip, we also got to see the Russians trying to fire at a Ukrainian helicopter with a man-pad and failing. Here's the clip. We see him waiting with the man-pad, getting ready to fire on the Ukrainian helicopter. We hear him spooling up the man pad. And firing. Missiles on its way. When you see the helicopter out in the distance firing off its flares, right where the mouse cursor is, right there. And no impact. The Igla missed. Very lucky, and great to know that the Ukrainians' strategy of flying very low to the tree line and firing off flares as soon as possible appears to have worked quite well, and they were able to survive that Igla attack. Moving on from that and into one of our other clips on the southern front, we also got to see a Russian car getting destroyed. We're going to be muting that and also getting this full screen. And we can see the drone coming on in onto this Russian Akhmat, because Akhmat is power, and they got the front engine bay knocking that thing out. And so with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Absolutely great to see. And moving on from that and on into the area of the southern front near Krynki, we also got to see that the Russians are starting to deploy T-55s into the region with some of the brigades that are here. Most of the brigades, except for the one, well, actually, it's not a brigade, it's actually a division level unit, but the one VDV division that's in the area is the only one that we know of that's well equipped. Every other one is kind of at this level of equipment at this point, using T-55s and older Soviet systems to try and keep their units running. But with that, that's the end of that little bit of news right there. Not really a lot to show rather than just the T-55s. And with that, it's time for us to go up to Kyiv and listen to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 683 of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Кілька підсумків за цей день. Перше, сьогодні з візитом в Україні міністр закордонних справ Японії. Наш дуже важливий, дуже міцний партнер. Вдячний за досягнутий рівень відносин між нашими державами. Справжнє партнерство, стратегічне партнерство і вдячний за підтримку, яку Японія надала нашій державі. Це і безпекова допомога, і сильне лідерство в групі 7 та загалом міжнародній політиці. І економічна підтримка. Ми цінуємо її і гуманітарне посилення України. Один із найкращих наших міжнародних результатів – відносини саме з Японією. Зараз є новий великий пакет енергетичної підтримки для України. Я вдячний за фінансову підтримку нашої держави. Сьогодні ми обговорили нашу подальшу взаємодію. Зокрема, конференцію щодо відновлення України, яка запланована на лютий. А також наші подальші спільні безпекові кроки, роботу щодо формули миру та щодо посилення санкцій проти Росії. Впевнений, що і цей рік буде достатньо змістовним для наших відносин. Друге. Швеція. Взяв участь сьогодні у відкритті безпекової конференції, яку щорічно проводить Шведська асоціація «Народ та оборона». Один з найбільш вагомих заходів у Північній Європі та найбільш представницький у Швеції. Конференція продовжує роботу на тижні. Сьогодні перший стартовий день. Представив бачення нашої держави щодо тих викликів та можливостей, які зараз є і для наших держав, України та Швеції, і для Європи загалом. Ключове – солідарність і спільні дії. Ми вже показали, що наша консолідація усіх в Європі та вільному світі здатна брати гору над усіма, навіть найбільш масштабними проявами агресії. І у цьому році маємо зробити ще більше. Маємо додати ще й співпрацю в оборонному виробництві, у спільних проєктах, зокрема в Україні. Шведські бойові машини CV-90, CV-90, шведська артилерія Арчери вже показала себе в руках наших воїнів на фронті. І уся Європа має достатній потенціал, щоб гарантувати безпеку за будь-яких обставин і настроїв в глобальній політиці. Третє. Провів тривалу нараду щодо наших планів на цей рік у відносинах з партнерами в Євросоюзі і в НАТО. Наша комунікація, наші внутрішні зміни, кроки у відносинах, на які розраховуємо. Також і непублічна робота з партнерами. Чітко формулюємо завдання. Були на нараді голова Верховної Ради, голова уряду і профільний віце-прем'єр-міністр, міністр закордонних справ, міністр оборони та його перший заступник, і міжнародники Офісу президента і голова Офісу. Пріоритети наші зрозумілі. повністю реалізувати рішення про відкриття переговорів, підготувати нашу переговорну рамку з Євросоюзом. Також виробити таку систему відносин і комунікацій з членами Альянсу, щоб кожна держава, кожен лідер на 100% відчували, що разом з Україною НАТО стане значно сильніше. Ще одне. Сьогодні увесь день ще тривають аварійно-рятувальні роботи в Покровську та в навколишніх селах. Це Донецька область. Наслідки російського ракетного удару вчора. Продовжуються пошуки людей під завалами. На місці працюють всі необхідні служби, зокрема наші рятувальники ДСНС України, поліцейські. Я вдячний кожному і кожній, хто задіяний в цій роботі. Особливо хочу відзначити сержанта Віталія Бута, головного майстер-сержанта Володимира Долженка, старшого лейтенанта Богдана Мачульного і майора Сергія Пишнограєва. Я вдячний за вашу самовідданість. Також відзначу працівників поліції в Донецькій області, сержант поліції Ілля Петренко, лейтенант поліції Ярослав Яресько та капітан поліції Сергій Левченко. Дякую, хлопці. Хочу також сказати про поліцейських Харківщини, тих, хто допомагає розбиратись з наслідками ударів російських терористів, допомагає людям, спілкується з рідними тих, хто загинув, встановлює правду і фіксує докази російських воєнних злочинів. Зокрема, відзначу поліцейських, які працювали на місці після російського удару по селу Гроза в Куп'янському районі. Майор поліції Юлія Бражо, майор Наталія Матвієнко та полковник Оксана Олійник. Я вдячний вам і усім вашим колегам, які працюють заради людей та України. Дякую кожному в Україні, хто додає сили нашій державі, хто зміцнює наші позиції, наших воїнів і увесь український народ. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And we're about to be moving on into the second part of this stream, where we get to talk to all of y'all probably only for about the next 20 minutes or so, because we actually have to get up very early in the morning tomorrow because law school starts again this next week, and I have to be there incredibly early in the morning, unbelievably early. But I want to make sure that we get to talk to all of y'all and also recognize those top donors that have made the fundraiser tonight possible. And I gotta say that it has been absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing to know that we've been able to raise $4,009 exactly for this fundraiser. Truly, absolutely incredible. Damn, son, where'd you find this? Truly, absolutely incredible and wonderful to see that we've been able to help out so much tonight. Not only that, passed the fundraiser goal by a whopping $1,009 exactly. And so, Matthew, could you call out the top donors of the stream?
All right, and since the last time, we have had a $50 donation from Steve Watkins at work. And also, we already called out the other one earlier, and big thanks to you for that as well. Sadly, I hate to say it, but for some reason, your name is slipping my mind. I really hate that. And also, it disappeared from the top of the live chat as well. So thank you very much, Steve Watkins at work, for that $50 donation to the fundraiser and helping to bring us up to our current figure. And also, huge thanks to everyone else as well. We've had successful fundraisers every single Sunday for well over 1.5 to 2 years. So huge thanks to you all. It's making a huge difference in Ukraine, and it wouldn't be possible without the LSA. So big thanks.
And with that, I hope that does address that quite well. And also, Matthew, those were all the top donors in between the last one and this one?
That was it.
Oh, okay. Well, with that, and also, Marion, no, my name is Andrew. I'm not James. I'm Andrew. because I saw, like, huge shout out to James and Matthew. I was like, who's James? I was like, I'm Andrew. Like, there is no James. But no, I'm Andrew, Marion. I'm not.
You can call me James, though. You can call me James May. Is he not coming on then?
Jeez. But with that, we are now moving on into the polls. So, Matthew, what do we got on them polls?
And also, by the way, Activista was the other donation, by the way. Thank you very much to Terrence Custer for pointing that out, because his memory is better than mine. And I cannot remember what the exact amount was, but the enforcer actually called it off as it was coming in. So, a big shout out to Activista once again, and he already left for the night. So, good night to you, Activista. And with that being said, we're moving on to our current poll question. And the question is, what is your favorite Ukrainian military unit from the choices? 29% said the Azov Battalion, while 27% said the Kraken Specialized Unit. Another 27% said the Magyar's Birds Unit, and 17% said the International Legion of Ukraine. So on this one, it's pretty subjective which one you like, because they're all equally equipped and able to take out orcs. But in my opinion, I think the Kraken is the best, or my favorite at least, out of the bunch. The Kraken are very well equipped. In fact, they are Guccified almost when it comes to their weaponry, and also they're very well trained. So I think the Kraken is my personal favorite. The second would be Azov. The third would be Magyar's units. Not units. And 16% said the International Legion. That would probably be my fourth option. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that in my honest opinion, I think the Azov is probably my favorite of the war so far out of all these options, simply because the 3rd Brigade, which is the Azov, has been fighting in Klishkivka, and we've seen so much of what they've done, and it's incredible work. They're truly fantastic, but saying that there's a favorite out of those is pretty tough, at least out of 3 of them, because I'm going to be honest with y'all, at least on, and I'm going to have to exclude some groups. The Freedom of Russia Legion, the Belarusian Foreign Volunteers, those are amazing parts of the International Legion of Ukraine. Spotless records, incredible units, they do a great job. However, I have started to notice that over the war, there's appeared to have been some very considerable issues with the rest of the Foreign Legion, excluding the Belarusians and the Russians, which have very honest goals, and they are very straightforward and very clean as far as their record goes. We did not cover this on the channel 2 weeks ago when it happened, but another Foreign Legion member, I believe they were American, was found dead floating down a river in Ukraine, and the Ukrainian police said that it may have been some kind of infighting in the International Legion that led to her death. That's actually been somewhat normal on like a monthly basis, that an International Legion member winds up dead, and the police just automatically start to assume, trying to connect the dots together, that it must have been some kind of infighting within the International Legion that led to them being murdered, pretty much. It seems as though everyone, not to disparage fighters that are fighting for Ukraine, because it's great that they're doing it, but it does seem like there has been some issues with the International Legion outside of the Belarusian and Russian contingents of it. So I would say that, beyond that, amazing units, incredible units. And it's great to see that it was almost such an even split amongst the Azov, the Kraken, and Magyar's Birds. And also to all of those International Legion fighters who aren't a part of the group that I'm talking about, because maybe it's a small group, and they're just causing a large amount of trouble for the massive International Legion, but, it always throws up a question to me, like, what's going on in the Legion? Because, some of y'all may also remember the British guy who got killed, and it actually turned out that the parents of the British Foreign Legion member that got killed went and did all of the sleuthing and found out that one of the Legion members that this British soldier was hanging out with was wildly incompetent, ended up firing his pistol accidentally in the barracks and fatally struck the British volunteer and killed him. And because of that, the guy ended up dying. And instead of reporting his death and the guy who accidentally killed him being held responsible, the folks in the barracks just decided to pretty much just put him in some linens and then throw him into the river and let him go float downstream. So, things like that, it's like there's, it's a little rough, but nevertheless, it is great to know that there are foreign fighters out there fighting for Ukraine, because a lot of them are doing incredible work. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, that was our only poll question to address for the final segment. So we are moving into our live chat questions, and tonight we didn't have the Morse code decoders. I can't believe it. They didn't show up tonight, or they didn't throw in the Morse tonight. So what are they doing, man? I'm telling you. I mean, what are y'all doing, man? Come on, can we get some respect around here, or what?
What the hell is going on? It's fine. I'm sure they're just taking a holiday.
They took the night off.
And I don't even really know what the message was. It was some kind of a riff. I know it was a riff, but I forgot exactly what the riff was. But nevertheless, let's get on into them questions, because we got about 15 minutes to answer all the questions we can.
And this one goes to T-Rep Adventures, who says, any word on what YouTube's going to do with the Russian judgment to reinstate their state propaganda channels?
They're probably not going to allow it, because YouTube is an American-based company, and that decision is probably going to be left to the actual U.S. government, and the U.S. is going to decide whether they come on or not. Or if YouTube is going to leave it up to themselves, the U.S. government may put pressure on YouTube to not allow them back on. Otherwise, there may be some kind of repercussions for YouTube. So it kind of depends, but I have a feeling they're probably not coming back on then. And so with that, I hope that does answer that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Kevin Small, who says, have we any update on the F-16s as of yet?
We've heard that the Danish ones have actually been delayed up until the later end of this year, which is wonderful. That's a great way to start off this year, is hearing that the first jets that were supposed to make it to Ukraine are already being delayed by nearly 11 to 12 months. But that's what we've heard so far. That's the only thing we've heard so far. So that wasn't necessarily great news, but hopefully the Dutch and Polish F-16s are still on schedule. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to the Midwestern Viking, who says, seen some disturbing tidbit from Newsweek saying Ukrainians that were taken POW and turned have gone into combat as of recently. Do you have any news on that? And sad if true.
I do not have any news on that at all, actually. I'd largely have to declare ignorance on that. But, with that, because I don't have any information on that at all. So sadly, I wouldn't be able to tell you much about it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Anonymous, who says, what are the chances that Rosgardvia, if activated, will align themselves with the government or with the people?
Oh, that's a great question, actually, because don't really know what they would align themselves with. During the Wagner coup, the Rosguardia units in the locality of Rostov-on-Don actually ended up dropping their weapons and siding with the Wagner unit, at least over those 23 to 24 hours. The other Rosguardia units that were along the way, like in cities like Voronezh and Tula, did nothing to stand in the way of the Wagner advance. It seems as though the proper Russian army was the only thing to actually respond. So the effectiveness of the Rosguardia in a situation like that is really up in the air. Historically, off the Wagner coup, they would most likely just let whatever's happening pass right by them, or they would actually side with the uprising. So I'd actually have to say, just based off their precedent, they would probably either remain neutral or join the uprising itself, based off of the Wagner precedent. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Melinda Grifford Vaughn, who says, what about those man-made islands, supposed to be fishing village, but no village, just airbase with runways and dredging sand from the ocean to make these out there near China?
Mike, can you read that again? I misunderstood it there.
And they said, what about those man-made islands, supposed to be fishing village, but there's no village, just an airbase with the runways and dredging sand in the ocean to make those?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting thing that the Chinese do, is that they build artificial islands within the South China Sea, and then they claim because those are Chinese islands, their territorial waters are expanded to include the waters outside of those islands. It doesn't work, though, and it doesn't really stand up well because they're artificial islands. They're not made by natural means. And for you to have territorial waters around an island, it has to be an island created by natural means. It can't be one that's artificially made, according to international maritime law, at least from my understanding at the moment. So that is kind of a little funny. And also, a lot of those islands end up sinking back into the sea because they're not naturally made. There's nothing stopping erosion from swallowing the islands back up almost as quickly as they were made. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one. But by the way, I just have to say really quickly, Cult of James, sound off. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, also known as Sarge, who says, Enforcer, isn't the China expansion, wouldn't it be a good reason for the U.S. to take control of Yemen?
Yeah, I would. Well, no, I'd like. Yes and no. Yes and no. I would say that the U.S. I'm not a big fan. Really quickly, I have to say this. I'm not a big fan of America taking control of a country, occupying it for a long time. That doesn't work well. It did work in Iraq. I will say that. But it was a very tough job, and I don't think we needed to be there that long. Whenever we get involved somewhere, we have to understand. I think the United States has a very hard time understanding this. We can't step in and create a federal republic like it exists in the United States everywhere. That just won't work. In a country like Yemen, us stepping in, occupying the nation, and then molding out of nothing a federal republic system would not work. Yemen has to have a government that works for themselves. So I think what we should go in and do in Yemen is we should go in and crush the Houthis and then bolster the Yemeni government that already exists at the moment and pretty much create, I guess the best thing to say is like a quasi-mandate system for the next 5 years where we kind of sit around with very limited forces in the area. I mean, maybe 2,000, maybe about a brigade-sized American unit inside of Yemen, and then let the Yemenis sort themselves out over those next 5 years. But if the Yemeni government ever needs U.S. military support during those 5 years, it will be provided. The Yemenis have to come up with a government system that will work for them. Because, like with Afghanistan, a centralized democratic, well, not a centralized, but a democratic system like we tried to install in Afghanistan would never work. It was a failure from the start. Afghanistan is not a country that is conducive to a democracy. Its culture and its history, along with its incredibly challenging geography, would never allow for a successful democratic governance of the country. It would most likely have done quite well under a monarchy, and we have seen historically in the past, Afghanistan did well with a monarchy. However, with Yemen, it's very hard to say the same thing. Yemen never really existed in any real way up until about the end of the 19th century. And by that point, I believe it was a British colonial holding or it was an Italian one. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it was actually an Italian. No, it was a British colonial holding. And then that's really how it was shaped into being and why we have it today. I think the U.S. should kind of just support whatever government arises in Yemen as long as it's American aligned. Whether it be a monarchy, whether it be some kind of a soft dictatorship, whether it be, an actual democracy like we would want, I think we should just back it up, whatever kind of works the best for the Yemeni people. And then, if there's ever like a cultural shift in Yemen and maybe they start to industrialize or even move on past industrialization and go into the service sector like the United States economy is now, and because of that, there's these natural social changes in Yemen, we shouldn't try and force the Yemeni government to stay the way it was. We should allow it to change, however, but also ensure that there's enough soft power that the United States is exerting inside of Yemen that they continue to remain an American ally in the country and have good reasons to do so. That's how I would deal with the Yemeni situation at the moment, but I would never try and encourage some kind of a stepping in where we, just take over Yemen and control the thing, because it just never really works out well. And with that, I hope that does address that well. And also, let's see here. Okay. But with that, I was making sure, man, because I saw that Packer got muted. I was like, "What happened?" I was like, "What happened to him?" Because he was just,
Rats took a hard fall, and sorry about that, Rats. That was actually me. I was trying to pin a message, and I clicked "Hi" and Rats instead.
Dude, I'm so sorry because I was actually reading what you were saying, Rats, and I was sitting there. I was like, "Oh, look at him, he's having a fun time." And then I saw boop. I was like, "What happened?" I was like, "What happened to him?" We're so sorry about that. I apologize for that greatly. That was a complete accident on our end, but. With that, I hope that addresses your question about Yemen fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And believe it or not, we actually did end up getting the Morse code decoders of the stream. They did come through. We got it from David Millsaps and also Old Scrolls. And they said tonight's Morse code reads, "The Russians losing hundreds of men a day is about as shocking as the sun rising the next day. Long live the LSA, Slava Ukraine."
And on the starboard! Was thinking, Captain. But anyways, y'all got the Morse code message correct. I decided to change it up a little bit tonight. If y'all are wondering what that was, that's the sinking of the Titanic, at least the first few seconds of it. But nevertheless, thank you so much once again for coming in and deciphering that Morse code message, because we thought nobody had done it. And you did it. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that quite well indeed, my boy. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next live chat question is going to go to Aaron Shu, who says, in regards to Ukraine versus Russia artillery fire volume, could it be that the Russian lines being so more defensive is easier to supply rather than Ukraine's offensive being harder to supply?
Good question. I don't know why, Matthew, but when it's always the comparison questions, like my brain stops computing what the words are. So could you reread that again?
Yes. Oh, hello there.
Hello there. Can I have a plum?
Could I have a plum? But anyways, make sure to remember, we want James May on here as a guest at some point. But anyways, Aaron Shu says, in regards to Ukraine versus Russia artillery fire volume, could it be that Russian lines being more so defensive is easier to supply rather than Ukraine's offensive being harder to supply?
I don't think so, because logistically at this point, as far as like the rear lines, what they may be able to form up, they actually would be very similar to each other at this point due to the terrain, the road systems, and all of that. I think it's really just that the Ukrainians are lacking the shells to be able to fire. So they're probably having to get word down from the MOD to the Army Corps, well, the Army Group level, the Army Corps, and then from there all the way down to your battalion level, telling them that their artillery consumption rates are going to have to significantly drop because there's just not enough ammunition to be able to fire as much as they wanted to, like they did earlier in the year in 2023. I think that really is the major issue we're seeing right now, and that could become a serious one. While an anonymous viewer throws in a 500 New Zealand dollar donation, getting this fundraiser up to 4.7. Damn!
Damn, anonymous, they threw in 500 New Zealand twice. Who's from New Zealand that's doing this? Who could it be?
Man, I only know of one New Zealander that could do something like that, and his name is Mark the Kinetic Possum. We don't know who it is, though. It's an anonymous viewer. We have
It could
no
be
idea.
someone else, and we just stole their credit.
Yeah,
it could be anyone.
Like, what the hell? But I want to thank whoever that is, because we don't know who you are, but you've just thrown in 1,000 New Zealand dollars into this fundraiser. Incredible stuff. Huge credit to you, and thank you for doing that. That's amazing. Someone wants us to reach 5K tonight, and I'm all for it. And so with that, we are on to, I believe, the third to last question of the night.
And actually, this is our last question of the night. It's the
What?
last one I have on the spreadsheet.
Huh?
So, Enforcer, would you like to do the whole thing?
Nani? But with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last viewer who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Tom Exman. Thank you, Tom, for that question. Here's a good question, okay? What do you think? The tanks, the tanks' loss has dropped down the last few weeks, especially in all the mud.
I gotta tell you, the tank losses are very low. I sat there and looked at them and said, wow, that's a very low amount of tank losses. But there's a good reason why.
I can't do that voice anymore at all, but...
I'm telling you, get real, don't be a jerk. Do you even know what you're talking about, man? I mean, come on.
Rocket Man, cuff that thing.
But anyways,
Oh,
the
cut
tank,
that thing.
I think the tank losses are dropping just because the Russians don't have a lot of active tanks out on the field anymore. And also, I think it really is just that. I mean, I was trying to think of another thing to explain it with, but I think it's just that they're not pulling out their tanks to support their infantry like they were in the past. At some point in the future, though, they will start to do that. Oh my God!
Oh! Anonymous coming in strong. I'm telling you what, Anonymous, whoever you are, you better let us know, because I'm curious at this point. Who is this person? Who is this masked man?
Who is this masked New Zealander? We just reached $5,043 on the fundraiser. We reached 5K
Thanks to
tonight.
that Kiwi.
Thanks to that Kiwi wife and Finn, or a kinetic possum. We don't know. It could not even be either of them. It could be anyone. But amazing stuff. And thank you for helping out the fundraiser tonight. You helped us to reach 5K, 2,000 over our original goal. Absolutely unbelievable. But moving on from that and answering this final question, I think it is because the Russians just aren't using their tanks as much. I think that's the honest answer. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you all so much once again for watching, because we've reached the end of tonight's stream with that very interesting question, with that very small answer. If y'all did enjoy tonight, and I know many of y'all have to, because we are truly the best channel on YouTube. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Nobody can even compare. And I'm kidding. There's a lot of people who can compare and do a lot better than us. Don't think I'm a narcissist. But nevertheless, if y'all did enjoy the stream tonight, and I'm hoping y'all did, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit the like button. We've gotten up to 1,818 likes. If that was a year in American history, that means that this would be the year that we start heading west in a slightly larger amount. Actually, that's the exact year that the state of Alabama became a state, 1819.
Westwood ho!
Westwood ho! And that's what you call the hoes up in Minnesota that are up at the bus station selling hot dogs. And I gotta tell you, it's like throwing a hot dog down a hallway up there. You pass when you don't hear a sound. But nevertheless, it is the end of tonight's stream. I gotta thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been absolutely wonderful to run this news for y'all tonight. And if y'all did enjoy, y'all know what to do. Y'all know what to do. And so with that, good night, good luck. And also, by the way, I forgot, before we even leave, we did reach an amazing height on the fundraiser, $5,043. Absolutely amazing. And that's an incredible thing to know that y'all have been able to do, and I've just got to back y'all up all the way on that. Y'all are the community that makes it possible for us to support Ukraine all the way until their victory, and hopefully we'll be here until the war ends. I know we'll be, and I hope the Lee Spring Army is too. And I know with the determined spirit y'all have, y'all will be here till the end of the war. It's just a matter of waiting. And so with that, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraine, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. Thank you all for another great fundraiser. And of course, we'll see you all on Tuesday. And Cult of James, good night. Slava Ukraine.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Запануєм і ми, браття, у своїй